Hello everybody, and I'm Justin Perez, and welcome back once again for another video here on the Air Raid Saturdays College Football YouTube channel. Today we are going to be rounding out and finishing the Power 5 conference predictions. We already did the ACC, the Big 10, Big 12, and most recently the Pac-12, which I still need to finish producing before I can get to this one, but I'm recording this one ahead of time. But right now we're going to be finishing the Power 5 conferences with the best conference in college football, and that is the SEC. I'm just going to be going through every single team as fast as I possibly can and seeing where they might finish record-wise this season. Quick disclaimer, just like the Big 10 video that I did a while back, or like a couple weeks ago or whatever, however long it was. Just like the Big 10 video, I'm gonna be talking about these teams, but by division. So I'll talk about all the teams in the East Division first, and then I'll transition over to the West Division. The East Division contains, in alphabetical order, the East Division contains Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. And the West Division contains Alabama, Arkansas, Arkansas, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Texas A&M. So, like I said, I'll be doing it through divisions. So we'll be starting off with the East Division first, and the first team we're going to be taking a look at is the Florida Gators. Now, Florida is head coached by Billy Napier. Now, Napier's in his second year as a Florida Gator head coach. Last season, the Gators didn't really do so well. They finished 6-7, 3-5 in the SEC, and they lost the Las Vegas Bowl to Oregon State. Really just a non-characteristic season by Florida, but I didn't really watch Florida too much last season. But, I'm sure they had a couple of injuries and a lot of inconsistency throughout the lineup, which caused for Florida to finish with that mediocre record. And besides, it was their first year under a new head coach. And, because of that, it's going to struggle. But this is, Napier's second year here in Florida. When looking at their schedule, they have a rematch with Utah in non-conference play. Obviously, Utah lost to Florida last year, and they also have to play Florida State too in their annual rivalry game. So really, there's only one non-conference game where Florida fans don't have to worry about, and that's the September 9th game against McNeese State. McNeese State, again, comes from the FCS, so not really much to worry about there. They have no Alabama on the schedule, which is a plus, but they still have to face some tough teams, which, especially in their division, which, includes Georgia. Kentucky's supposed to be decent this year. Missouri's supposed to be okay. They're supposed to be somewhat competitive. And they also have a couple of, cross-conference games like every SEC team does. They got to play Arkansas and South Carolina. Or no, South Carolina's from the East Division. My apologies. But that's going to be a tough game. And then they have a cross-division game with Arkansas, which, again, that's going to be tough for them. And they also have to play they also have to play Tennessee early in the season. So, it's just a lot of tough competition. As far as the way I see their season going, I see them losing to Utah on August 31st, which is on a Thursday night. Obviously, last season, Florida beat Utah in that thrilling game, went down to the wire. But I just feel like Utah, they're playing at home now, and I think they're gonna win that game. I think Utah's a better team overall than Florida, but I picked Florida to win to lose that game. Then I see them beating McNeese State the next week. Then conference play begins early as they play Tennessee at home on September the 16th. Tennessee obviously coming off that amazing year last year. Tennessee obviously coming off an 11-2 campaign where they, knocked off Alabama. They're going to be a good team despite, some of the controversies surrounding that program, with some allegations that were done recruiting-wise. I still think that Tennessee is going to be a phenomenal team. They return a lot of their players from last season. Obviously, they have a new quarterback, but, we'll get to that since Hendon Hooker's there. But either way, it's still going to be a dominant Tennessee team. And I don't think that Florida is really ready at all to get to Tennessee's level this season. I mean, they could win because, again, it is the SEC, and in the SEC, there's a lot of games that can go either way. We saw that with Kentucky last year, how they lost to Vanderbilt. But I just think Tennessee is going to win this game. However, even though they start 1-2, I see them pulling off 4 straight wins against Charlotte at home. That's another non-conference game. At Kentucky versus Vanderbilt, and at South Carolina. You know, Charlotte, they were terrible last season. Charlotte, to me, was one of the Charlotte 49ers are one of the biggest disappointments to me last college football season. I just thought they were going to be much better, and they ended up finishing 1-11, I believe. But yeah, Charlotte, that game's at home. Florida should wipe the floor with the Charlotte 49ers. Then they got to play Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's supposed to be a decent team. Like usual, they've been one of the more steady programs in the conference over the last decade. And, you know, we'll get to them in a little while here shortly. But, you know, Kentucky, I don't think that they're good enough to beat Florida, so I'll take Florida to win that. Then Vanderbilt, they're by far going to be the worst team in this conference, as they are almost every single year. That should be an easy win for Florida to get. And then they got to play South Carolina on the road. Now, this game could be a little bit tricky to predict just because of the fact that, you know, obviously their offense is amazing. You know, still, you know, they can put up points. You know, they get good quarterbacking play. You know, they have a solid offense. But I really believe that Florida will come out and win that game as well to have a good start to the season. Obviously, Spencer Rattler will produce some problems in that game because ever since he came to South Carolina, he's reinvigorated his career. But you know, I just think that Florida will win that one on the road to get to 5-2. Then they get the bye week. Then they'll play Georgia, and I don't think that Florida has any chance to beat Georgia, even though that game's in Jacksonville. So Florida will get a lot of the home advantage since, you know, it's in Florida, Jacksonville. But I just think that, you know, they're going to lose that game big time to Georgia. I think they'll beat Arkansas. They'll lose to LSU. They'll beat Missouri, and then they'll lose to Florida State at the end of the season to finish the 2023 campaign at 7-5 and 5-3 in the SEC. My realistic expectation meter can be from anywhere from 6 to 8 wins. This team will go bowling again. I look at a game against LSU and Utah. You know, I'm looking at those LSU and Utah games, and even the Tennessee game, and I could say those are all winnable games. You know, Florida could win all those games, or they could win just one of them. But I just think that they're going to just finish with 8 wins max this season. I don't see them finishing above 8 wins. You know, but we'll see how this things play out. You know, this conference is very tricky to predict because because most of the teams are close. If you just exclude Alabama and Georgia, a lot of the teams will go neck and neck when they play each other, and even LSU to a certain extent. A lot of the teams will go neck and neck when playing each other, so it's very difficult to predict what games a team might win or lose. But I'm pretty confident with Florida's predictions here. So 7-5 and 5-3 in the SEC. Now we're transitioning over to the team that's been the top dog in the SEC over the last few years. It's the Georgia Bulldogs. They're head coached by Kirby Smart, who's in his 8th year as Georgia head coach. He's 81-15 overall. Last season, Georgia went undefeated, a perfect 15-0, as they won the SEC title versus LSU. They won the Peach Bowl semifinal against Ohio State in the semifinal in the college football playoff, and they won the national championship game 65-7 over TCU. Their non-conference schedule is extremely easy as they play Tennessee Martin, Ball State, UAB, and Georgia Tech. So that should be a base for 4 wins right away. They do not have to play Alabama on the schedule. But pretty much all their games in the SEC are, winnable. And my reasonable expectations for this team is to go either from 11 to 12 wins. So they could go undefeated, but I think they have one clunker against the team, that they're supposed to beat, since this is the SEC after all. Obviously, college football, Georgia, they've been the top dog now for the last couple of years. They've won back-to-back national titles. And, they're going to be on pursuit for a 3rd straight national championship. And this schedule that they have here is going to really propel them to get deep into the season without any problems whatsoever. They start the season at home with 4 consecutive home games. And they only play 5 road games during the season. That's including the Florida game that's in Jacksonville. So really, they have an advantage here. They have 7 home games and 4 away games. So they haven't made out for them this season. As you can see, I see them starting off a perfect 9-0 for the season. They'll beat Tennessee Martin on September the 2nd. They'll beat my Ball State Cardinals on September the 9th. Remember, Ball State is my favorite team. I mentioned that in the Pac-12 video, I believe, but yeah. Ball State is my favorite team, but there's no way we're gonna beat Georgia, so they'll go to 2-0. Then they'll also beat South Carolina, UAB, at Auburn, Kentucky, and at Vanderbilt. I look at that stretch for their first 7 games, and the games that they could lose to are at Auburn and possibly versus South Carolina. I think they got it in the bag with Kentucky and Vanderbilt. The Auburn game's a little bit scary as their cross-division game, but I still think that Georgia will come out on top in that one. Then I see them beating Florida and Missouri after the bye week to get to a perfect 9-0. Unfortunately, I have them losing 1 game this season, and that's the Ole Miss or Mississippi November 11th play in the season. I just think that they're going to have a clunker against someone, and Ole Miss that's head coached by Lane Kiffin. They have one of the better offenses in college football, and it could pose problems for any defense. Lane Kiffin is a offensive extraordinaire that can do anything against any defense. So I think they'll lose that game. I doubt that they'll lose that game, but I'm just throwing a loss in there. And then they'll beat Tennessee and Georgia Tech on the road to finish the season at 11-1 and 7-1 in the SEC. Again, it's just going to be another typical year for Georgia Bulldog football. I don't need to say a lot there. I can move on to the Kentucky Wildcats. Now Kentucky, they're head coached by Mark Stoops. He's in his 11th year at Kentucky. He has a decent record, a respectable record of 66-59. And Mark Stoops, he's done a phenomenal job at Kentucky, just rebuilding that program and giving it constant stability. Kentucky was at a point where they were one of the worst teams in college football, and now every year, they're making bowl games. They're at least being above water. They're being respectable, and that's what you can ask for if you're a Kentucky fan. Now, last season, the Wildcats finished with a 7-5 record and 3-5 in the SEC. However, they lost shockingly in the Music City Bowl to Iowa, which I talked about Iowa in my Big Ten preview, my predictions video. And, obviously I was shocked that Kentucky got shut out and lost 21-0 because Iowa's offense was just abysmal throughout the season. And obviously Kentucky's offense was way better than Iowa's offense, but that Iowa defense carried them throughout the season, which is the reason why they lost that game. Non-conference slate has 3 wins built in, but the tilt against Louisville at the end of the season could present the loss. It's possible that Kentucky could win that game, but that's more of a 50-50 game than anything. Unfortunately for Kentucky, Alabama is on the schedule now. The Alabama game early in November is a home game, but I mean, come on, Alabama's not going to lose to Kentucky by any means. If Kentucky pulls that game out, I'd be stunned. Reasonable expectation meter for them, I'd say they can get anywhere from 6 to 8 wins. This team is good enough to be a team that can be in position to compete for a bowl game, to get above 6 wins, to possibly get up to 8 wins. I look at their schedule, and obviously that Louisville game is extremely winnable. But I also look at games against Tennessee, Florida, and Mississippi State, and they could possibly get a win in either of those 2 games as well as the Louisville game. As far as my predictions play out, I see them starting off with a perfect 4-0. They'll beat Ball State during the first game. They'll beat Eastern Kentucky in the second game. They'll get by Akron in the third game, and then they'll start conference play with an easy win on the road against Vanderbilt. Even though Vanderbilt beat Kentucky last season, I don't think that they're going to replicate that this year. It's just one of those games that a team loses, a clunker as I call it, as I've referenced plenty of times on this channel before already. But I don't think, I think that on the road, Kentucky will get their revenge. They'll beat Vanderbilt pretty easily to start a perfect 4-0. As you can see, their non-conference schedule includes games against 2 MAC teams and an FCS team. Ball State, people are not really high on them this season, including myself. As a Ball State fan, I don't see ourselves being really good this season, but it's possible they could be competitive and surprise some people because we got in a lot of, decent transfers. I just, obviously, Ball State, they've never beaten an SEC team, and I don't think that we will beat an SEC team unless it's against Vanderbilt. They also got to play against Akron, who's supposed to be the worst team in the conference this season, so that should be an easy win, and Eastern Kentucky is an FCS team. and Vanderbilt. Again, we just talked about that. Now, I see after the Vanderbilt game, I see them losing back-to-back weeks to Florida and to Georgia. The Florida game, the Georgia game, those are going to be two teams that Kentucky's going to have some struggles with this season. Florida, it's possible that Kentucky is better than Florida, but overall, I just do not believe that they'll beat Florida. It's, even though it's a home game, I don't know what to expect in that game. It's more of a 50-50 game than anything. And that Georgia game, that's almost impossible. I don't see Georgia going on the road and beating the Bulldogs at all. So they're 4-2, but then I see them getting a win before the bye week versus Missouri, to improve to 5-2 before the bye week. By the way, I apologize if you heard a couple dogs barking in the background. Those are my family's two dogs. They were just barking right now, so I had to move to where I was. So I apologize if you heard that, and if you heard my mic cutting in and out. But anyway, getting past that, so they're 5-2, but then they have a really tough stretch at the end of the season. They got to play Tennessee, Alabama, Louisville, and even Mississippi State. I see them losing 4 out of the last 5 games, but their one win will come at South Carolina. I think they will pull off a win against South Carolina. People are really high on them this year, and I am too. But South Carolina is not one of those teams that are going to be impossible for anybody to beat. So I'll take Kentucky in that one. But yeah, I see the Wildcats finishing 6-6 and 3-5 in the SEC. They could pull out a couple of more wins. I look at that Mississippi State game. I look at that Louisville game and say, you know what, if they come out and if they play well and if they don't turn the ball over, then they could win those games as well. So it's possible that Kentucky can finish 8-4, maybe even 9-3, but I think that's pushing it. But we'll see what happens. But I have Kentucky finishing 6-6 and 3-5 in the SEC. Now we're going to transition over to the Missouri Tigers. Now Missouri, they're head coached by Elia Drinkwitz. That's kind of a funny name if you ask me. Elia Drinkwitz, he's in his 4th year at Missouri. If I'm pronouncing his name wrong, just let me know. I haven't watched too much Missouri football over the last couple of years, and because they've been mediocre at best, and they're not on my radar as far as top games that I want to watch. But yeah, Elia Drinkwitz, or Elia, is in his 4th year at Missouri. He's 17-19 overall. Last season, Missouri kind of struggled. They finished 6-7 and 3-5 in the SEC. They lost the Gasparilla Bowl to Wake Forest, which is for the reason for that 7th loss. They have a decently tough non-conference schedule with Kansas State and Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State's actually a really underrated team in the group of 5. So, but just wanted to throw that out there. They're an underrated challenge for sure, and their cross-division games are against LSU and Arkansas. Realistic expectations, this is one of those teams that are very difficult to predict because you don't know what you're getting. There's a lot of question marks as far as the roster is concerned, but that there's talent. There's talent enough to where they could, have a breakout year and get maybe 7-8 wins. But you just don't know with this team. So my realistic expectation is 4 to 8 wins. I see them starting off the season against, at 2-0. I see them starting off 2-0 to start the season against FCS South Dakota and Middle Tennessee State. I think that game will be a little tight, but by the end, Missouri will just blow away and win that game. Then I think they'll lose to defending Big 12 champion Kansas State. I know that there's some questions because some of their players got lost at the NFL or through graduation, but they're still going to be a good team. And I think that Kansas State will just pose too much of a challenge for Missouri, but we'll see how that goes. Then I see them winning the next 2 games versus Memphis and at Vanderbilt to put themselves at 4-1. Then they got to play LSU and Kentucky, and I think those will be both losses, so they're 4-3. However, before the bye week, I think they'll get by South Carolina to get to 5-3 before the bye week. Now, before the bye week, you could go, they could beat Kentucky, they could beat Kansas State. I don't know if they could beat LSU. That remains to be seen. But I do know that the Kentucky and Kansas State games are somewhat winnable, especially that Kentucky game. But after the bye week, they have a really tough stretch. They got to play Georgia on the road. They got to play Tennessee and Florida at home. and then they got to play Arkansas on the road on a Friday night. They're gonna lose to Georgia. That's not a give. That's a given. And they're gonna lose to Tennessee. That's a given. I think Tennessee is a way better team than Missouri. So kind of on the edge there at 5-5, and then I see them losing at home to Florida. Like I mentioned with the Gators when we talked about them. I think they'll lose to Florida to drop to 5-6, but then I think they'll beat Arkansas on a Friday night. I know it's a short week, and I know it's on the road, but I think this Missouri team has enough talent to where they could overcome that situation and put themselves in the bowl game. So I see Missouri going 6-6 and 3-5 in the SEC. It's possible that they could win more games. That's why I said 4 to 8 wins. They could lose a couple more games. They could win a couple more games. Again, it's one of those teams that we really don't know what we're getting. We don't know what's going to happen with the Missouri Tigers, but I have Missouri finishing 6-6 and 3-5 in the SEC. Then for the next team, we have I think 3 more teams to go in the East Division. We're going to talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. South Carolina's head coach by Shane Beamer, who's in his 3rd year, 15-11 overall since being appointed as the head coach at South Carolina. He's 8-5 last season. They went 4-4 in the SEC, and they lost to Gator Bowl to freaking Notre Dame, unfortunately. They had a really good season last year. When they got Spencer Rattler in, to do the quarterbacking, and that offense could do plenty of damage. Especially when they have Antoine Wells and Xavier Leggett as the receivers, and then they also brought in a couple nice transfers, including wide receiver Eddie Lewis to be in the slot. So, and they also have Trey Knox, who's one of the better tight ends right now in the SEC. He's very productive. He's also a graduate transfer. So, the South Carolina offense can put up some points as it did last season. They have a huge collection of 50-50 games on the SEC schedule. When you look at their non-conference, there should at least be 2 wins from their non-conference schedule. Out of the 3 non-conference games, there should be 2 wins because they got to play Furman and Jacksonville State. And that North Carolina game is 50-50 as well. But reasonable expectations for the Gamecocks. They can be either from 6 to 9 wins. I believe that they will have enough talent to not miss the bowl season. But they could get a couple more wins. I look at that Clemson game. They beat Clemson last year, I believe. I look at that Clemson game, that Kentucky game, and that Missouri game, and even the Florida game as all games that they could win. I see them starting off 2-0. I think they'll pull off an upset against North Carolina in Charlotte. So that technically counts as a road game, but whatever. So they'll beat North Carolina and Furman to start the season off 2-0. Then they'll lose to Georgia in a blowout. It's on the road. Not much to say there. Then they'll beat Mississippi State to go to 3-1 before they lose to Tennessee to drop to 3-2 before the bye week. Again, that's a tough stretch for road games. I think they'll pull out at least one, and the one that's most likely to happen is the game against Mississippi State. So I see them starting off 3-2 before the bye week. Then I think they'll lose the next 2 games to Florida and at Missouri. To drop to 3-4, and then I see them picking up 3 straight wins to get to bowl eligibility. I think they'll beat Texas A&M in Kyle Field or whatever it's called. I think they'll beat them and the 12th man in that game. I think they'll easily get by Jacksonville State, who just moved up to Conference USA for this season, and I think they'll get by Vanderbilt pretty easily as well. So that a 6-4 record. But then I see them losing the last 2 games of the season to Kentucky and Clemson. They're both home games. I know they're both at home, but again, Clemson is a better team on paper, and Kentucky, you got to throw in wins and losses somewhere because this conference is extremely competitive. So I see them finishing 6-6 and 3-5 in the SEC. It's possible they can get up to 9 wins. I look at that Clemson game, the Kentucky game, the Missouri game, the Florida game. Those are all winnable games in my opinion, but I think they'll lose quite a few. So as a result, I think they'll go 6-6 this season and 3-5 in the SEC. Next, we are going to transition over to the Tennessee Volunteers. They're head coached by Josh Heupel. He's in his 3rd year and he's 18-8 overall. Last season, Tennessee just had their breakout year. That's the breakout year that every team dreams of when they're looking to get off of the mat and become relevant again. They went 11-2 and 6-2 in the SEC, and they won the Orange Bowl against the Clemson Tigers. They're going to be a really great team this year once again. There's a change in quarterback because Hendon Hooker now went off to the NFL. So, now it's all about Joe Milton once again. The redshirt senior. Let's see if he can be the passer that everybody wants him to be. He has a lot of interesting targets, including Ramel Keaton, Brew McCoy, and Jacob Warren as well, who is a senior tight end. And also there's a man named Squirrel White. Yes, that's his name, Squirrel White. Squirrel White is a sophomore, and I think he's one of the players that you need to look at for Tennessee. I think he played a little bit last year. I wasn't too sure. But yeah, just his name alone makes him a man to watch. But he's also slated to be a starter for the wide receiver corps, so look out for him. Joe Milton has a lot of pretty good weapons to use around, and the defense is obviously headlined, or not headlined, but they brought in, there's a lot of experience on this roster, especially on the line. You have Tyler Barron, Amari Thomas, Bryson Eason, Roman Harrison. And even they brought in Keenan Phil, who's a senior transfer, to man one of the linebacker spots. And the secondary is just filled. The whole secondary is just seniors with Danico Slaughter, Wesley Walker, Jalen McCullough, Brandon Turnage, and Tamarion McDonald. So overall, it's a really talented team with tons of experience. And looking at their schedule here, they have some non-conference games that could pose a challenge. And we're not some, but there's one game that could pose a challenge, and that's the UTSA game on September 23rd. The other games against Virginia and Austin Peay, I'm not even worrying about. They should be in position to win every single SEC game this season, and my realistic expectation is 9-12 wins. So it's possible they could go undefeated. They just got to get through Alabama and Georgia, which is possible because, again, we saw last year that Tennessee beat Alabama, and I think it's possible that they could beat Georgia, but we don't know until the game gets played. Now, I see them starting off 5-0 before the bye week. They'll beat Virginia and Austin Peay easily. That Virginia game is considered a neutral site since it's in Nashville. But I just think that Tennessee is going to slaughter the hell out of Virginia. So they'll beat them easily. They'll beat Virginia and Austin Peay. And then I think they'll knock off Florida on the road before they get an underrated test at versus UTSA. I still think they'll win that game pretty easily. At least heading into the fourth quarter, as we keep getting further and further into the game. Then they'll beat South Carolina. They have the bye week. Then they'll get to Texas A&M and they'll beat Texas A&M. So already they're bowl eligible with 6 wins. I think they'll lose to Alabama on October the 21st. I think, again, that's a game that they could win, but I got to give the edge to Alabama here. And then they'll go on another 3-game winning streak or another winning streak. They'll beat Kentucky, UConn, and Missouri. So pretty much all 3 out of the 4 non-conference games really don't have to worry about. Even though UConn's a pretty good team heading into this season, I don't see Tennessee having a problem at all. They're at home. Then they'll be Georgia on the road before they got to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. I think this game is going to be extremely close. It's going to go down to the wire, but I see Georgia pulling that one out. And then they beat Vanderbilt at the end of the season to finish the season at 10-2 and 6-2 in the SEC. Like I said, those Alabama and Georgia games are extremely winnable if they play the right way, if they're coached the right way, and if they don't make mistakes, and if they can put up points on the board, especially against that Georgia defense. If they could attack that Georgia defense and put up points on the board, then watch out, because that could be an upset, as well as the Alabama game. Also, that Georgia game's at home, so, Tennessee has a little bit of an advantage with that one. So we'll see how that one plays out. But Tennessee, I have them 10-2 and 6-2 in the SEC. Now we transition into the last team in the East Division, and that's the Vanderbilt Commodores. And all I can say is, oh boy. They're head coached by Clark Lee, who's in his third year. He has a 7-17 record. Last season, Vanderbilt kind of made a big, surprise, finishing 5-7. They won 2 SEC games. They were 2-6 in the SEC. One of those games came against Kentucky, which was pretty shocking because I did not expect Kentucky to lose that game. But again, this is Vanderbilt Commodores. They've never been a great team. They haven't been a good team in a long time. I think their last winning season was in 2013. Looking at their schedule, they have a non-conference slate that can produce up to 3 wins. They got to play Hawaii, Alabama A&M, Wake Forest, and UNLV in their non-conference slate. Winnable. They have a couple winnable SEC games, including Missouri at home. They also have Kentucky at home. They have Florida on the road. Auburn's at home. So they have some home games. They only have never mind. They have 4 and 4. SEC 4 home games, 4 away games. But they have some winnable games. I know it sounds crazy, but this team can get up to 3 wins. Up to 7 wins. They can go anywhere from 3 to 7 wins. Because again, I look at those games against Kentucky, Missouri, Florida, even Auburn, Mississippi, and I can say, well, maybe if it's possible they could pull it out. But overall, I see this team finishing 3-9 and 0-8 in the SEC. Their only 3 wins will come against Alabama, A&M, Hawaii, and UNLV. And that Wake Forest game could also be winnable because the defense is a little bit suspect, but I think that they'll just put up a shit ton of points, and they'll win that game pretty easily late in the game. And that's about it. I see them losing every single game in the SEC starting on September 23rd, and then I just see them going winless, man. I don't have that much confidence in Vanderbilt to put together a nice, great season at all. Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt. They're going to be the punching bag in the SEC year in and year out. This is another year that I see them being that punching bag. So 3-9 for Vanderbilt and winless in the SEC. For any Vanderbilt fans that are watching this, I apologize. I do not hate you guys at all. It's just that your team isn't very good. It's just, it is what it is. But yes, so 3-9 and 0-8 in the SEC for Vanderbilt. Now we start off with the West Division with the Alabama Crimson Tide. So we finished the East Division, and now we're moving on to the West Division. Alabama, obviously head coached by Nick Saban, 194 wins, 27 losses, 17 years at Alabama. Don't have to go into detail about what he's done there. He's 11-2 last season, 6-2 in the SEC, and they destroyed Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl. They have a rematch with Texas at home. Last year's game was at Texas, and they won that game closely. They don't face too many new faces. They don't face too many, opponents that they can't beat. But since there's a lot of new faces for this Alabama team, I think it's kind of hard for them to avoid 2 losses again. There's just a lot of players moving in and out. So getting back to Alabama, I just think that they have way too many new faces to not avoid a 2-loss team again. That's why I put them the realistic expectations from 10 to 11 wins. They're still going to be a great football team. They're still going to be good. I just feel like this season, they're going to need a lot of their younger guys to get some experience, to get some playing time and learn and play before they can get back to that 11-1 college football playoff thing again. If this was the expanded college football playoff tournament, which we'll be getting next season, then they would be in. But, for the playoff committee, a 2-loss team is not good enough to make it into the playoff. However, as you can see by my projected record, I have Alabama going 10-2 and 6-2 in the SEC. They'll beat pretty much everybody before that LSU game. I had them going 8-0. Their non-conference schedule includes Middle Tennessee State, Texas, South Florida or USF, and Tennessee Chattanooga from the FCS. I think they'll sweep that entire non-conference slate. Not much to worry about there. The Texas game is a lot to worry about because they played them tough last year. But I think Alabama will still win. And this time it's at home in Tuscaloosa, so you also got to throw in that factor as well. I just think that their 2 losses will come against LSU and Auburn. Again, the SEC is the SEC. I know that Auburn didn't have a great year last year, but they're poised for a bounce back year, at least somewhat. I know Auburn finished, Auburn finished 5-7 last year. But they have a new head coach, and I feel like they're going to be better offensively than last year. So I think they'll lose that game, and then the LSU game. LSU's LSU. LSU. They're always gonna pose a challenge to Alabama no matter what. And then, last year LSU made the conference title game, and I feel like they might be able to do that again this season. So as a result, I'm giving losses to LSU, or I'm giving losses against LSU and Auburn for Alabama. But everybody else, I see them beating pretty fine. Obviously, Tennessee's a game to worry about on October 21st because of what happened last year, and Tennessee's a good football team. But I don't think they're going to lose 3 games this season, because God forbid if Alabama loses 3 games this season, then their fan base will start tearing down the walls in their houses, and they'll start going crazy again because they're not in the playoff, even though that's a successful year regardless. But anyway, I see Alabama finishing 10-2 and 6-2 in the SEC. Now transitioning over, we have the Arkansas Razorbacks. In Arkansas, they're head coached by Sam Pittman, who's at his 4th year at the University of Arkansas. Last season, they went 7-6 and 3-5 in the SEC, and they won the Liberty Bowl against Kansas in that 3 overtime shootout. I think the game ended with the 55-53 score. When looking at their team this year, it should be once again competitive. It's not going to be amazing by any stretch, but they'll get to a bowl game again. The non-conference slate shouldn't be a problem unless if they lose to BYU. If they lose to BYU, then that's a problem. But every other non-conference opponent is pretty much easy for them. Their non-conference games include Western Carolina, Kent State, and FIU. In addition to that BYU game, they do play Auburn at home on November 11th, which is pretty good. They play Missouri at home. They play Texas A&M in Arlington, so that's technically a road game. They got to play at LSU and Alabama on the road. I feel like they're going to upset one of those 2 teams. So as you can see, I had them starting off 4-0. They'll get through Western Carolina, Kent State, BYU, and LSU to start 4-0. Then they'll lose the next 3 games to Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Alabama. 2 of those 3 games, or as a matter of fact, all 3 of those games are on the road because Arlington is in Texas, so that's going to be a home field advantage for Texas A&M. They'll lose those 3 games, and they'll beat Mississippi State on October 21st. I'm sure that Arkansas, they're going to be psyched up to play in front of their home fans again after that long 3-week road trip. Knowing that they have a bye week, they're going to come out and they're going to play aggressive, and they're going to, play well, to end at least end that stretch of the season at 5-3 before the bye week. I see them losing at Florida. Then I see them picking up wins against Auburn and Florida International, or FIU, before they lose at home on Friday, November 24th against Missouri. I see Arkansas finishing with a 7-5 record and a 3-5 record overall in the SEC. The Auburn Tigers have a brand new head coach this season, and that's Hugh Freeze. Now, Hugh Freeze had a lot of success, I believe, at Liberty over the last few years, and he's going to try to resurrect this Tiger program that really struggled last season. The Tigers, they went 5-7 last year. They missed the bowl season. They went 2-6 in the SEC. I expect this year to be somewhat of a bounce back year for the Auburn Tigers. They're not going to be anything amazing, like top 5 team potential, but they will be more competitive, even if they weren't competitive last season, which they were in most games. But what I'm saying is they'll be able to win more games, including that extremely easy non-conference schedule. Other than Cal on September 9th, the second game of the season, the other non-conference games are pretty easy. They got to play UMass, Samford, and New Mexico State all at home. Those should be walk in the parks, easy wins for Auburn. Even though New Mexico State had a pretty good year last year and they made a bowl game, they shouldn't be competitive at all. And UMass sucks, and Samford's from the FCS. So, they got those 3 games, and they're talented enough to pull out close upset wins in SEC play. And as a result, I believe that they can get up to 7 wins minimum and 9 wins maximum. So starting off their schedule, I see them going 3-0 against UMass, at Cal, and versus Samford. Auburn fans, they're going to be staying up pretty late to watch that California game, because that's all the way in the West Coast. And that game starts at 10 o'clock, I believe, on ESPN. I gotta look at the schedule, but I think that game starts off pretty late. But yeah, I see them winning all those 3 games. Then they'll lose on the road against Texas A&M and against Georgia. Again, Texas A&M is an extremely hard place to play, and Georgia is Georgia, so I don't gotta get into detail about that. 3-2 before the bye week. Then they'll lose at LSU. It'll be a close game. I will say that it'll be a close game. It'll be a mano fourth quarter game. Where the game can be tied going into the fourth quarter. But I don't know if Auburn has enough firepower to win that game. But we'll see. Then, however, I see them going on a 3-game winning streak, another 3-game winning streak to get to 6 wins in bowl eligibility. I think they'll beat both teams from Mississippi, and then they'll take down Vanderbilt on November the 4th. They have that game at Arkansas, but I don't. Again, this is the SEC, so anybody could win any game. I think they'll lose to Arkansas, but then they'll beat New Mexico State and Alabama in a shocker to end the year at 8-4 and 4-4 in the SEC. So Auburn, they're gonna have a bounce back year. They're gonna get back to some form of respectability, and they'll be Auburn again. They have enough talent to not repeat what they did last season. They struggle with inconsistency, but that's not going to be the problem. And watch out for the offense too. I think the offense will have a really good year this year and put up a lot of points. Now we're talking about the other team called the Tigers in the West Division. That's LSU, the Tigers of LSU, head coached by Brian Kelly, who I do not like at all. But I don't want to get into why I do not like him. I don't think that'll be professional. But just look up what happened to Declan Sullivan from Notre Dame if you haven't heard about what happened. But Brian Kelly's the head coach. He's at his second year and 10-4 in the SEC. 10-4 overall last season and 6-3 in the SEC. They lost the SEC championship game to Georgia, but they won the Citrus Bowl by blowing out Purdue. When looking at their conference schedule, other than that tilt against Florida State to open the season, their non-conference schedule should be relatively easy, as they got to play Grambling State, Army, and Georgia State. There's no Georgia and Tennessee on the schedule, which is a plus, but they still have to beat Alabama. Realistic expectations, I would say LSU has a chance to get from anywhere between 9 to 12 wins, so it's possible they could be undefeated, but I have them suffering a clunker against Arkansas on September 23rd. Other than that, I see them winning every other game. That Florida State game in Orlando, that's basically a road game, since Florida, Orlando, Florida State has the advantage there with the crowd. But LSU barely lost to Florida State last season. The extra point got blocked and they lost 24-23 at the end of the game. I believe that was the score, but I believe they'll come back and they'll beat Florida State. It's going to be a tight contest. That's possibly the best game during the week 1 schedule. Then they'll get by Grambling State relatively easily, and they'll beat Miss State on the road. Like I said, they'll lose that game against Arkansas, but I see them beating Ole Miss and Missouri on the road before coming home to play Auburn and Army. They'll beat those teams. They have a bye week, so they're 7-1 heading into the bye week. Then I think they'll pull off an upset, if you want to call it an upset, against Alabama on the road. I know Alabama, it's kind of tough for anybody to play, but I think LSU will be ready to play in that game and they'll get that win. And then they'll finish the season off after that with 3 more wins to Florida, Georgia State, and Texas A&M. So I see LSU finishing 11-1 and 7-1 in the SEC. So a great season overall for LSU, and I expect them to be in the race for a potential college football playoff spot. Alright, so now let's transition over to the Ole Miss Runnin' Rebels, as I like to call them. I like to call them the Ole Miss Runnin' Rebels. Why? I have no idea, but the Mississippi Rebels, or what most people call them, Ole Miss. Last season, they went 8-5 and 4-4 in the SEC. They lost a high-scoring Texas Bowl, but a pretty close one to Texas Tech. Obviously, Texas Tech and Ole Miss, they just love to score some points, especially with their head coach, Lane Kiffin, who's in his 4th year at Mississippi. He has a 23-13 record, and he's helped resurrect the struggling Ole Miss program ever since he's gotten there. But this season it could be way better. I see them finishing 8-4 in the regular season. So again, same record at the end of the regular season last year, 8-4 before they lost that Texas Bowl. But I think they'll be a little bit better on defense. Something just tells me that they'll be better on defense. Obviously, they're a high-scoring machine. They have an underrated tough non-conference till at Tulane, so they play on the road in New Orleans against Tulane. But it should be. I still think they'll get by Tulane, and other than that Tulane game, they have a relatively easy non-conference schedule. They should be an intriguing part of the SEC West Division race. Expect them to be pretty damn close for most of the season. Now, obviously, my predictions could be wrong here. They could be a little bit better. They could be a little bit, I don't think they'll be a little bit worse. They could be a little bit better. But expect, my realistic expectation meter is from 7 to 10 wins. I have Ole Miss finishing 8-4 and 4-4 in the SEC. And the way they'll get there is they'll win the first 3 games. They got to play Mercer, Tulane, and Georgia Tech. All those are going to be wins. Mercer's from the FCS. Georgia Tech stinks. And Tulane, again, it's going to be of a fight because they won the Cotton Bowl last year, and they're a really good team. And they're going to be back this year, and they're going to be just as good as they were last year. But I think that they will end up pulling that one out. Then I see them losing to Alabama and LSU. I just think that both those teams are better than what they are. Then they'll get by Arkansas to be 4-2 before the bye week. Then after the bye week, they got to go to Auburn. And I think, to give Auburn a win, a conference win, I think that they will lose this game. But it's possible that they could win it too. Then after that Auburn game, they win their next 4. I see them beating Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Louisiana Monroe, and on November 11th, I see Ole Miss pulling off a major upset on the road at Georgia. We talked about Georgia when we were talking to them in the East Division. Even though Georgia's defense is elite all the time, something tells me, I have a gut feeling that Ole Miss will be able to present a lot of problems and challenges for Georgia's defensive front and their entire defense due to their elite passing game. Then they'll get by Louisiana Monroe. They'll beat them easily. Then they'll lose the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving Day to Mississippi State to finish 8-4 and 4-4 in the SEC. They could beat Mississippi State. They could beat Auburn to get to 10 wins. I do not think they're going to beat Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. I think they'll lose at least 2 of those games. But I see them beating Georgia on the road for some reason. Something tells me that Ole Miss is going to pull that out. Why? I don't know. I just always go with my gut feeling here. It's pretty good too. My gut feeling is always pretty correct. So I'm just going to stick with that. And I think they'll win that game. So I see them finishing 8-4 this season. Mississippi State, the rival of Ole Miss, the Bulldogs. Head coached by Zach Arnett. This is his first year, however. He won a game last season, and that was the ReliQuest Bowl against Illinois. Now, the reason why he coached that game was obviously because, lovable head coach, lovable personality, Mike Leach, sadly passed away before that bowl game last season. And, honestly, if I'm being honest, that was a very tough situation, obviously, for everybody involved with college football. Not just for the coaches and players of the Bulldogs, but for everybody. Mike Leach was just an extraordinarily, gifted person. He was lovable human being. He had a great personality, and, I still can't believe that he's still not here. I still can't fathom that he passed away, but, that's life, unfortunately. Sometimes things happen. They catch you off guard, and it happens. It's life. I experienced that personally last summer. So it happens. Unfortunately, he's not here. But I watched that ReliQuest Bowl against Illinois, and I will say that it was a very emotional moment. For everybody that watched the game, for me, for everybody that watched it for Mississippi State, and it was emotional to see them come out and win that game because of that unfortunate situation. So before I continue on, I just want to say congrats to Mississippi State for continuing to push on and fight on after losing their beloved head coach. Now Zach Arnett, he's taken over. Like I said, he was the guy that coached during that Reliant Quest Bowl, and they have a decently tough non-conference schedule heading into this season. However, fortunately, they do not have to play Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. They, avoid all those teams. I know they finished with 9 wins last year, but I think the team will take a step back because they lost several of their top players, and Zach Arnett's still a brand new head coach who's, I think they're still using Mike Leach's system, but again, with a new head coach and with new players coming in, it's going to take time for them to gain some any type of traction, what they got last year. I think they'll regress a little bit. My realistic expectation is 5 to 7 wins. I see them finishing 6-6 and 2-6 in the SEC. As far as their non-conference games are concerned, they got Southeast Louisiana, Arizona, Western Michigan, and Southern Mississippi, or Southern Miss as I call them. I think they'll win all 4 of those games. I think a couple of those games will be kind of close, especially those Arizona and Southern Miss games. The Western Michigan game could be a little bit close. They could start off a little bit slow, but I don't know if that's going to happen because that'll be, already a few weeks into the season. And then Southeast Louisiana game is going to be a cakewalk. But I just have them, struggling in the SEC. They got to play LSU, South Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Texas A&M, Kentucky. All these, and even Ole Miss the last week of the season. A lot of those teams are going to present big time challenges for Mississippi State, and I don't know if they're talented enough to overcome a lot of those challenges, especially when it comes to games against LSU, Alabama, Southern Miss. That's going to be tough, man. Playing in the West Division is not easy for these teams like Mississippi State. It's just not easy. So as a result, I see them going 6-6 and 2-6 in the SEC. I kind of feel bad for predicting them to have that regression, considering what's gone on with that program, but Mississippi State will be just fine with Zach Arnett. I feel like they'll be just above water level. They'll be fine. They're not gonna just take a terrible step back this season. They will take a step back, but I believe they'll still make the bowl season, and they'll have a somewhat competitive team to where they could win most games and get into the bowl picture. So 6-6 for Mississippi State, and 2-6 in the SEC. Last but not least, we have the Texas A&M Aggies, head coached by Jimbo Fisher, who's in his 6th year. Jimbo's been a really good coach, but last season, man, was just a complete disappointment. He's 39-27 overall, but 7 of those losses came last season. Texas A&M finished 5-7 and 2-6 in the SEC. They have a tough trip at Miami for a non-conference game. They beat Miami last year, I believe. But yeah, that's still going to be a tough game on the road. Then they got to play Tennessee and South Carolina for their cross-division games. That sucks. But I feel like Texas A&M, they'll get a rebound here, and they'll get back up from 7 to 8 wins. I think they'll finish 7-5 and 3-5 overall in the SEC. In the 3-5 in the SEC and 7-5 overall. I think they'll win their first 5 games to start the season, but after that, they'll go on a 4-game losing streak, in between a bye week, and then they'll beat Miss State and Abilene Christian, which is a non-conference game, by the way. Abilene Christian, they'll get to 7 wins there, but then they'll lose to LSU on the road to finish 7-5 and 3-5 in the SEC. As you can see, Texas A&M's non-conference schedule isn't all that amazing. Other than that Miami game on September the 9th, they got to play New Mexico, Louisiana Monroe, and Abilene Christian. So, that's not that difficult of a non-conference schedule other than that Miami game, which is why I see them getting 7 wins. It's possible they could beat South Carolina or Ole Miss and possibly maybe even LSU. I don't know. But, yeah, I just have them finishing 7-5 and 3-5 in the SEC. So that's going to do it for my SEC predictions. I try to go a little bit quicker with this one because, it's very difficult to go under an hour, or at least, be significantly above an hour for these videos. But just to recap my final SEC standing predictions, in the East Division, I have Georgia coming out with a 7-1 record. Then I see Tennessee finishing 6-2, Florida finishing 5-3, Kentucky, Missouri, and South Carolina finishing 3-5, and Vanderbilt finishing 0-8 in the East Division. Then in the West Division, I see LSU coming out of that division as the West Division champion, also finishing 7-1. And then I see them, Alabama being behind them by a game, so 6-2. Then Auburn and Ole Miss will finish 4-4 in the SEC, and then Texas A&M, Arkansas will finish 3-5, and then Mississippi State will finish 7th place and 2-6 in the SEC. A lot of teams tied for specific locations in a division, but that's what it is when it comes to the SEC. Now for the championship, for the second straight year, I have Georgia beating LSU in the SEC championship. Georgia is the class of this conference, and until somebody dethrones them, I'm picking them to win the SEC. Again, it's going to be close because you have Tennessee, you have Alabama, you have LSU, even Florida to a certain extent, and maybe even Auburn if they get hot, but I just think that Georgia is the team to beat in the SEC, and I think they will make it back to the college football playoff, and they will win this conference over LSU. So, like, comment, share, subscribe on the video. I'm sorry that I took too long, but we made it. We got through the Power 5 conferences. I'll try to post these 2 Pac-12 and SEC videos as quick as I possibly can. I'm under a time crunch here. I have a lot of things going on right now. But I'll try to post these out pretty soon. And after this video, I will go into the independents. I'll do a short video talking about the independent teams. There's only 4 teams that are independents, including crappy Notre Dame. And then I'll try to get done as many group of 5 conferences as I possibly can do. So, like I said, like, comment, share, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the flip side. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time.